What's going on, guys? This is Skyhound, also known as Xavier Pierce, Geek Archivist. So, you guys probably weren't expecting me to try to do a second video this month, but I felt that considering this movie did come out in December and it was the last of the trilogy, I felt like going over it again to an extent. But what I'm getting at here is I'm going over the final installment of Lord of the Rings, which is Return of the King. Now, I want to be clear on a few things. Number one, when it comes to this final installment, there's a little something that is different in terms of pacing for the animated version of this, and then you have the one done by Peter Jackson. Besides format and pacing, most of the stuff you would say is different. For those of you guys who watched the animated films, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and then Return of the King, mind you, they did not put The Two Towers as a separate animated film. From my understanding, I am probably wrong about this, they probably combined the first two, The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, into one film. And then The Return of the King was its own separate film. However, there are some parts that still pretty much was taken straight from the book. But the difference being is that with The Return of the King, they added elements from The Two Towers into this third film. Particularly the part with Shelob and then, Sam having to confront it after she stuns Frodo with her stinger. But with that being said, let's get straight into it, shall we? Okay, so before I even begin, I will say this, that I do remember watching this in the theater on the same month when it got released. That was back in 2003. I mean, sorry, not 2000. Yeah, it was 2003. I was in high school at that point. And the thing was that I will admit that I started reading the books a little bit late, because looking back when they first started this whole thing, I learned about the start of The Lord of the Rings without even realizing that there were books. But it started back when the film Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker was coming out. And I was watching that in the theaters with my parents and my little brother at the time. So as they were playing the advertisements, I then eventually saw the teaser trailer for Fellowship of the Ring, which was pretty clear that I knew to an extent that there was likely books. And once I found out about it, I eventually became immersed into it. Now, with regards to this final entry done by Peter Jackson, this one, out of all three films, had a complete sweep at the Oscars in terms of the specific categories in order for it to become a sweep in terms of the different departments. They got all of it. And the good thing about this one is that, yes, it tried to stay true to it, but I remembered when I was joining Orange Hat and a few others, as we were going over the extended version of the films, I will put a link in the description down below, that when the original author, Tolkien, was going over this, he said he would only sell the rights for this film for $1, because the fans of Tolkien knew that they wouldn't get this right. And looking at it now, arguably, Tolkien would say, and we're just quoting here, he would say that this didn't live up. Did Peter Jackson, do his best with the information he was given? Yes. Now, with that being said, obviously, Peter Jackson's the director. Elijah Wood plays Frodo Baggins. Ian McKellen, most know him for his performance as Magneto in the X-Men films. He plays Gandalf in this. Liv Tyler, who is obviously the daughter of the lead singer of Aerosmith, plays Arwen. Viggo Mortensen, despite only knowing him as Aragorn, aka Strider, in this one, I did recently watch one of the old films that one would say was his first. I might be wrong, but I don't remember the exact title. All I do know is that was back in the 90s. Sean Astin plays Samwise Gamgee. Cate Blanchett plays Galadriel. John Rhys Davis. Not only was he Gimli in this one, but for fans of Indiana Jones, you know him as Salah. And obviously, with this one, we lost a few individuals. Recently, Bernard Hill, who played King Theoden, he's in this one. May he rest in peace. Billy Boyd as Peregrine Took. Dominic Monaghan. I apologize if I mispronounce the last names because it's been a while. He plays Meriadoc. Orlando Bloom. Fans recognize him playing in the Pirates films. He played Legolas. Hugo Weaving plays Elrond. Miranda Otto plays Eowyn. David Wenham as Faramir. Carl Urban. Oh my gosh. That man's performance as Eomer, I remembered when I was going over this with Orange Hat, right when we were going over specific parts. We weren't going over it bit by bit because it's way too long. But he did tell me that he wanted to know, how did Carl Urban ever get into that mindset, because remember, after the Battle of Pelennor Fields and, good wins the day, he finds Eowyn on top of their deceased uncle. And he thought that she was dead. And the way he played that part, like showing the grief and anguish, he was like, damn, that was so freaking good. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about on that scene, because I just kind of described it to the best of my ability. But there's so many people that played, a really good job here. We also have John Noble, who played Denethor. Really good performance, I'll give him that. Andy Serkis, props to him for doing Gollum so well and helping with, motion capture and all of that. Ian Holm, rest in peace. He played Bilbo. Sean Bean as Boromir. Fans of Game of Thrones, you know where I'm going at with this. Lawrence Macquarie, who played the Witch King as well as Gothmog. From my understanding, I'm guessing he provided the voice, but he did the physicality part of Gothmog, because if you watch the way how that character is played, from my observation, when I keep rewatching this, I'm saying that I don't see any other person that could pull off the physicality of an orc like this man. I'm just giving the man props and his due. That's what I'm saying. Paul Norrell, who played the King of the Dead, obviously that ghost that leads that dead army. Martin Sokas, who plays Celeborn. Rip Sir Christopher Lee, who played Saruman brilliantly. And there's quite a few good videos of him explaining stuff in terms of performance acting. The only one that I recall watching once, it was a short clip. Christopher Lee was explaining. I think it was a fencing sword that he had, an actual fencing sword. It's like those things were heavy. It's like this long, roughly, and it was actual metal. Like it was no prop. The way how he explains it, and the way how they handle that stuff. I mean, you want to talk about, actual forging, blacksmithing of blades and how they did it back in the day? It's tiring. It is very tiring. Like for those of you guys who actually get the actual props and those actually, work on it, seriously, try holding those physically if you're able to. If you're able to, like, take it off the mount, if it's on the mount. Hold it. Physically hold it. That stuff is not easy to make. I'm just saying, those people, when they were working on this and then long hours, I mean, kudos to the crew that was working on these films. Kudos. Anyway, there's a few other ones. We had Brad Dourif, who plays Grima Wormtongue, Bruce Hopkins for Gambling. I mean, that's pretty much almost like most of the cast. But the difference between the extended edition and then the regular one, which doesn't have some of these other scenes, look at how long this is. 4 hours, 23 minutes. The other one was like roughly a little bit less. So bear with me for a few seconds as I look it up. Yeah, it took me a bit because I had quite a number of films, though, on my account. But yeah, here's the obvious difference. 3 hours, 21 minutes for the regular version. But yeah, now you see the difference in terms of extended versus the regular. You have roughly an hour more footage between the two formats. Okay, so with regards to differences between the two formats, animated and live action, I do want to point out a few moments. I'm not going to go over the entire thing because it would take forever, but I want to point out at least ones that stood out to me. So when Orange Hat was going over a moment where Gandalf was facing the Witch King of Angmar, there is something I want to point out here. The animated version, which was roughly in the late 1980s, had that moment as well. However, you only see this moment in the extended version, not in the regular version of this. Line is pretty much the same, when Gandalf is confronting the Witch King. And after the Witch King siphons off the energy from Gandalf's staff, which breaks the staff, he eventually hears the horns of Rohan and then flies off. Now, there is some parts here that are different, and I'm going to point it out right now, between all three formats. In the original book, it's been a while since I've read this, but there is a moment that when it comes to the black ships, specifically, the animated version, you do not see what happens, but Gandalf is just narrating that the tide has turned. In Peter Jackson's take, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli convinced the dead king to join them in their fight. In the book, Aragorn is with the Rangers, which he was a part of originally, because, as you can tell, he was originally referred to as Strider. And so they joined the fight. That's a key difference between those three. Now, there is another part that is really nice towards the end. It had to do with what Aragorn says as he's being crowned king. Viggo Mortensen actually sang the Elvish lines, but I'm not going to try and say it. I'm just going to go with what's translated as Gandalf says, in the common tongue. It's on page 1206, The Steward and the King. And those were the words that Elendil spoke when he came up out of the sea on the wings of the wind. Out of the great sea to Middle Earth I am come. In this place will I abide, and my heirs, unto the ending of the world. Now, I will admit that the way how they tried to do most of these scenes, I will say that with the limited information they got from the books and the way how Peter Jackson tried to adapt it, I say he did a good job with it. Now, in terms of another moment, I did bring it up with Orange Hat, but for those of you who do not know this, if you guys watch the extended version, there's a moment in the House of Healing scene. Someone is singing in that part. Turns out it's actually Liv Tyler, Arwen. She's the one singing in that moment. If you think I'm lying, check it out on YouTube. Try to type it up. I bet you it is there. But overall, I will say that in terms of the speeches, though, I mean, Orange Hat and I and the others, we brought it up. I brought up the one with regards to Theoden, but the part at the Black Gate, that one probably stuck out a little bit more to me than Theoden's. I mean, they both did a great job, Viggo Mortensen and Bernard, with the roles that they were given. But there's just something about that speech at the Black Gate that just gives me chills when I think back on it. Now, if I had to really give a good rating, if I had to give a rating on this overall, because this is a really long movie, objectively, I'd say 8 out of 10. Subjectively, and as a moviegoer, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. And I also want to point out before I finish up here, the lines that's actually in the book, the Elvish lines, and I just gave the common tongue version. That was actually not just only in the booklet, for the physical copy of the original soundtrack for Return of the King. Regular version, by the way. But that was also, that part that I just read from the book was not shown in the animated version. But anyway, yeah, this is just me, Skyhound, also known as Xavier Pierce, Geek Archivist, just giving my general thoughts, analysis, and review of Return of the King. Hope you guys have great happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Stay safe, stay sane, and as my good friend Orange Hat would say, stay humble. Peace.